Today, we're going to talk about the Nifty 50. You've probably heard the name thrown around, right? It's basically the go-to snapshot for the Indian economy, one of the fastest growing markets out there. So if you've ever wanted to know what all the fuss is about, you're in the right place. We're going to break down exactly what makes it tick.
So think about this. How do you even begin to measure the health of a huge, booming economy like India's? I mean, sure, you could look at things like GDP or job numbers, but one of the quickest ways, a real-time pulse check, is its main stock market index. And yeah, for India, the big one is the Nifty 50. All right, so here's the game plan. First up, we'll cover what the Nifty 50 even is, then we'll peek under the hood at the companies inside. After that, we'll look at how it's performed over the years, talk about how you can actually invest in it, and wrap up with what makes this thing go up or down.
Okay, let's dive right into part one. So what exactly is the Nifty 50? Well, the simplest way to think about it is like a live report card for India's biggest companies, and by extension, the entire economy.
Okay, so here's the official definition. The Nifty 50 is what we call a benchmark stock index. It got its start back in 1996. Its job is pretty simple. It tracks the 50 largest and most traded companies on India's national stock exchange. You'll hear that called the NSE. The number you see for the Nifty 50, that's basically a weighted average that tells you, at a glance, how this group of elite companies is doing. But why should you care? What makes it so important? Well, for one, it's that economic barometer we talked about. But get this, just these 50 companies make up more than 60% of the entire stock market's value on the NSE. That's huge. Plus, it's the foundation for a ton of investment options, like index funds and ETFs. So to put it simply, when the Nifty 50 has a good day or a bad day, believe me, the rest of the market pays attention. All right, so we know what it is, but what's in it? Let's take a look inside and see what kind of companies are actually running the show here. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. If you break it down by industry, one thing just jumps out at you: financials. Banks and financial companies make up a whopping 40% of the whole index, 40%. After that, you've got information technology, way back at around 15%, and then other big areas like consumer goods and energy. This mix tells you a story, right? It shows you that finance and tech are the real engines of India's modern economy. And when you look at the names in these sectors, you'll see a lot of familiar faces. In financials, we're talking about giants like HDFC Bank and ICICI Bank. In the IT space, you've got global powerhouses like TCS and Infosys. And holding down the energy sector is the massive Reliance Industries. I mean, these aren't just big companies. They are, for all intents and purposes, the market. Okay, so you've got these huge companies in the index, which leads to the big question: how has it actually performed over the years? Has it been a good investment? Well, check this out. Since it started back in '96, the Nifty 50 has averaged an annual return of about 11 to 12%. Now, that's a really solid long-term return. It's no wonder it's pulled in so much money, not just from India, but from investors all over the world. But, it's never a smooth ride to the top, right? Of course not. During bull markets, when everyone's feeling optimistic, the index can just skyrocket, especially when foreign investment is pouring in. But on the flip side, it's definitely had its tough times. Bear markets, economic downturns, global shocks. Think about the 2008 crisis or what happened in 2020. It can get hit and hit hard. But here's the most important thing to remember about its performance: resilience. Yeah, it can be volatile in the short term, but historically, it has always bounced back from those big drops. It tends to reward the people who stick with it for the long haul. Okay, so this probably has you wondering, this sounds cool, but how do I actually, invest in it? Let's get down to the practical side of things. Basically, there are three main paths you can take. The first, and probably the most common for most people, is through index funds. They're super simple. They just buy and hold all 500 stocks to match the index. The second option is ETFs, or exchange-traded funds. They're a lot like index funds, but you can buy and sell them throughout the day, just like a single stock. And then you have the third way: futures and options. Now, this is for the pros. It involves making complex bets on where the index is headed. It's way, way riskier and definitely not where you want to start. All right, last section. We've covered the what and the how, so let's talk about the why. What are the big forces that actually make the Nifty 50 move every day? It's really a mix of things happening at home and things happening around the world. On the domestic side, you've got the big ones: India's overall economic growth, or GDP, and of course, how well those 50 companies themselves are doing, their earnings reports. But then it's also super sensitive to global news. A tiny change in interest rates by the US Federal Reserve can send shockwaves. Same goes for stuff like global oil prices or any kind of geopolitical drama. It all has an effect.
And that really brings us to the core idea here. All that global stuff, it can create a lot of noise day to day. But the long-term story of the Nifty 50 is tied directly to the long-term story of India's economy. It's a simple connection. When the economy thrives, companies make more money, and the index goes up. So, let's wrap it up with a thought for you. The Nifty 50 is more than just a number. It's a direct link to the story of one of the world's most dynamic economies. Now that you know how it all fits together, the real question is India's growth story a part of your plan?